and welcome. In this on-demand video, OJM Group partner David Mandell shares the details of a recent $43 million malpractice verdict and highlights the importance of asset protection planning for all physicians. If you have more questions or want to learn how to incorporate asset protection into your financial strategy, click the link below to schedule a complimentary one-on-one consultation with one of our experienced team members.
Hello, I'm David Mandell, principal of the OJM Group, and I'm going to be presenting very quickly on an important new case, the recent $43 million malpractice verdict against a physician and their practice, and why this highlights the need for asset protection planning for doctors. Okay, so some of you may have heard of this case before. This was certainly made the headlines, both within the medical community and without. You can see something here from CNN, and it made national news because of, I think, the verdict amount, but also because of the high-profile nature of the case itself. And this involved a Philadelphia Eagle NFL player who was actually a captain of the team. I think this case went back to when they made the Super Bowl, not this last year, but a number of years ago. And Chris Maragos was injured, and I believe it was the knee injury, had maybe one or multiple surgeries. And those didn't go well, didn't go as was expected or hoped for. And he brought a malpractice claim against the orthopedic surgeon, as well as the practice itself, which is a very large orthopedic practice with offices, I think, throughout the Northeast. And the jury trial had a number of high-profile witnesses, including some of his teammates. And I think for the physician, for the orthopedic surgeon, a number of high-profile physicians on the surgeon's behalf. And the verdict came down with a $43.5 million judgment against the physician and the practice, and they divvied that up. And I think it was in the neighborhood of $21 million a piece. It wasn't exactly 50-50. I think it was a little higher against the orthopedic surgeon individually and a little bit less for the practice. But this is obviously an outlier case in the amount of the judgment, but it's not an outlier in the sense that there are malpractice cases that go beyond traditional 1 million, 3 million coverage limits all the time in jurisdictions all over the country. So it doesn't take that much research, if you were interested, for you to find cases that were brought for that amount and that actual verdicts or judgments that were entered for that amount. So the idea that one's typical 1 million, $3 million coverage, and some may have a little bit more than that, and some may have a little bit less than that, will cover you against all claims is absolutely untrue. Now, I'm not someone who points the panic button, pushes the panic button, meaning that it is unlikely that any one individual doc is going to have personal liability that goes beyond insurance coverage for a malpractice case, but it's certainly a possibility. And for me, and I've been advising clients as an attorney and now a wealth manager for almost 30 years, and this actually goes all the way back to my father, who was a radiologist who was concerned about malpractice cases himself, just doing a lot of reading a lot of x-rays, et cetera, and doing that every day and every week and every month and every year. He knows eventually he's going to miss something, or there's going to be a bad outcome. And he wanted to protect against that happening and putting all of his savings and the family wealth basically risked if he had such a case. All the way back when I was in law school, he was looking for asset protection planning, and he found it. And this was way back in the early 90s when this was a burgeoning, just a growing new area, field of law. Well, now 30 years later, we have a lot of established cases and statutes, et cetera. So I think what this case brings to the forefront is something that most physicians and most of you watching this probably already acknowledge and realize, which is asset protection planning should be part of every physician's wealth plan. And we make it part of that at OJM Group, because while we can't say for sure that you'll ever get involved in this case, in fact, it is unlikely, we can't say for sure that it won't happen. And if that kind of planning can be done in advance of the case, or in advance of actually seeing that kind of patient, it can be very effective. It doesn't have to be very costly. It can integrate and actually be part of estate planning and tax reduction planning, and a whole other list of wealth planning goals. So why not do it? If you're going to be in the practice of medicine, if you're going to be treating patients, and don't just think that it's because this person was in the prime of their NFL career. If you're working treating patients, they could be in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s. But unlike an NFL player who makes a lot of money for a short time, they may have 10, 20, 30, 40 years of income that if they're hurt, if they're pass away, because die, if they're injured in a way that they can't perform their profession or their ability to earn income, you could get to the same present value amounts of loss of earnings, pain and suffering, et cetera, than someone who's a professional athlete, because they, I'm sure in the trial, showed a very short window of potential earnings. Most of these people are retired by 30 or at least by 35, whereas, someone like me, if I was injured and couldn't perform my career, I may work till I'm in my 70s. So these things tend to even out. So important case, wanted you to know about it, okay? But it's not the only type of liability facing physicians, okay? Certainly malpractice is the one that brought us this high visibility case, but there's employer liability, which is having liability for your employees or other partners, or even your own actions. That could be harassment, that could be wrongful termination. I've spoken about this on other ViewMany videos, the qualified plan liability that you may have for your practice if you're the one of the owners and has fiduciary duty. Think about this very case, in fact, because as I mentioned, about half the verdict, $20 million or so, is against the practice. That means all those orthopedists, all those orthopedic surgeons who are partners in that practice are now on the hook for this liability when they had nothing to do with the case, nothing to do with this procedure, nothing to do with this patient, because that judgment was against half of it or so, okay, in the ballpark, was against the surgeon, and then half against the practice itself. So you can have vicarious liability for other people's actions, and that's could be tied to employees, that could be tied to other partners. Certainly there's billing issues. You guys are familiar with that. Audits by Medicare or private payers that say you have to pay back because you billed more than you should have. There's HIPAA violations. I have orthopedic practices and others who have been hit with cyber cases and breach of data, and they have liability because of that. Certainly, if you own properties, premises liability, slip and falls, injuries on the property, whether that's at the practice or rental properties you may own personally. Personal liability from contracts or driving, or teenagers in your house driving. All these kinds of things can create liability. You really have two choices in how you're going to deal with that. You can either say, well, I'm just going to practice as well as I can, and I'm going to be really careful with my real estate, and I'm going to make sure my qualified plan is audited by a third party, and I'm going to, make sure I only have partners who are as careful as I am. Risk management is important, and we've written a piece that's CME certified. It's on hiatus between editions right now, so we can't put it out there. But when we get it done, we'll have it. It had been certified all the way back to 1998, so 25 years. So we recognize the importance of doing the best you can and practicing as well as you can, or owning real estate and managing that as well as you can, or driving as well as you can. But I think what asset protection recognizes is no matter how well we behave, there may be bad outcomes as from patients. There may be injuries on properties. We may have liability related to outside businesses. We may have liability related to outside people, meaning employees or partners that we can't control. So the good news is that asset protection planning, when you put the proper tools and planning in place, it protects against any type of claim, meaning if you used an LLC or use an exempt asset, it's not only shielding against malpractice, it's shielding against any type of claim where someone might have a judgment and try to get to the value of those assets. Now, in our books, okay, which we've had for 25 years now, we've been using this sliding scale. We use a -5 to +5 scale. Certainly, it could be 0 to 10. But the point is that there's different levels of exposure. If you own an asset in your name with no exemption, that's 100% exempt. 100% exposed. That's -5. If depending on what state you're in, and a lot of it depends on what state you're in. If you own something jointly, that could be 100% liable in a state that has community property. That could be a state that has 50% liable and are exposed in many states. And then depending if you're married and you're in a state that has tenancy by the entirety, that could be actually totally protected against claims against one spouse. But the point is there's negative positions that should have significant exposure. On the positive side, the most protective you're going to get is an exempt asset. And that could be an exemption like a homestead or an IRA or a life insurance policy, or even to some degree, a domestic asset protection trust. That's going to be limited, meaning we want to take advantage of those +5 tools as much as we can. And I can't tell you how many physicians don't. They don't even realize what the exemptions are in their state. And my task when I'm working with clients is not to get them to +5 across the board. That's not possible. But it's not to let them linger in those minus categories for a significant part of their assets, and to move in a cost-effective way, in a way that's easy to manage and not disruptive, but move most of their net worth, or at least the significant parts of it, from the negative positions to the positive positions. And we use lots of different tools, from ownership forms to limited liability companies, to limited partnerships, to trusts, corporations, all sorts of tools, exempt assets, especially moving them into the positive position. And we have lots of other videos on ViewMedi. Certainly, we have our books, which you'll hear about in a minute. You can get them for free. And there's over 70 pages in our book, Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician, on asset protection planning. And then, of course, we're happy to consult with you. You'll hear about this in the next slide or two as I sign off. How you can get in touch with us? We always are happy to have a free initial consult. I want you to think about, as I close, the doc involved in this practice, in this lawsuit, and his partners, his many partners. It's a big practice, and the stress they're going under right now because they have a $10-20 million judgment against the practice of them personally. And when they know insurance doesn't cover them, they're sitting there, if they haven't done this planning, totally exposed in many assets, I'm sure, in terms of what's coming down the road, the plaintiff coming after them in their personal assets. That's terrible stress. That's terrible results. And I hope that you can learn from this and make asset protection planning part of your wealth plan. And we're happy to play a role in that if you think we can. So with that, thank you for listening. Stay on for the next slide or two, where you can learn about how to get our books for free and how you can have a consult with us for free as well. Thank you.
OJM is a multidisciplinary wealth management firm. We specialize in working with doctors, and our team has helped physicians reduce taxes, protect assets, and achieve their financial goals. Don't forget, OJM Group also offers viewers a complimentary consultation where we can answer your questions to see if our firm might be a good fit for your situation. Simply click the button below to schedule your free consultation.